We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Tuesday morning edition. Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Listen, it's Tuesday. We got ourselves, I think, actually a jam-packed show. A lot to discuss. No more time to waste. Let's dive in. We're going to open. I already see the chat humming on this one. James Franklin. No, he is not getting fired, but I think increasingly it feels like there's a better chance that he could leave for another job. We'll talk about an article in which they kind of speculate, okay, these are the jobs that might actually make sense for James Franklin. So could James Franklin be on the move? Only place to move Bill Belichick might be the retirement home, because goodness gracious, an unbelievable story came out yesterday, Monday, about the state of North Carolina football. We're going to discuss all that. And then we will wrap. Number one high school player in America, Tyran Stokes. Tick, tick. It feels like his recruitment is coming to an end. He cut his list to 5 this weekend. I think within the next week he will be committed. And the big question is, do we know where he's headed and how soon will it happen? We'll discuss that. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure you're subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. Really do appreciate your support of the show. 62,000 subscribers we have hit. Also, make sure you subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you do listen on podcast, do me a favor, leave a 5-star rating, leave a quick review. Let us know how much you appreciate the show. Speaking of appreciate, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about our hotel and casino partners, Circa Sportsbook, Circa Casino. Okay, so I've told you all about Circa, but bottom line is this. Listen, it's that time of year. You're planning for the holidays. You want to get away. If you want a place to go hang out, watch some really good football, basketball, whatever, Circa Casino, Circa Sportsbook in Vegas, biggest sportsbook in the world, best place on the West Coast to watch games. Here's the good news, though. Guess what? Circa just opened a brand new sportsbook on the East Coast for those of you who can't make it out to Vegas. Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky is now officially a Circa Sportsbook. The best part is all the great amenities, all of the things that make the Circa Sportsbook in Vegas great, make the one in Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky great as well. This is on the Kentucky-Tennessee border, so an easy drive from Nashville, Bowling Green, Kentucky, wherever you may be. Lexington, Louisville is not that far either. And finally, I'll say this. We're doing some Torres pods live from that Circa Sportsbook here in the coming weeks and months. So make sure to stay tuned to that. And if you get to the Circa Sportsbook, Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky, make sure to tag your boy Torres. Let Circa Sports know as well, at Circa Sports, at Aaron_Torres. Let them know that Torres sent you. With that said, woo, buddy, it is a busy Tuesday in sports. There's no more time to waste. The chat is humming. Let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, listen, I think this is the biggest story right now in all of college sports. It is just the state of things at Penn State, and more specifically, the state of things with their new head coach, James Franklin. Okay, so we're recording Tuesday morning. At this point, we don't need to relitigate everything that happened over the course of this past weekend, but it did change the landscape of not only Penn State's season, but I do think the trajectory of who James Franklin is and how long, frankly, he may be staying at Penn State. New reports out that maybe he'll pursue a couple interesting jobs. We'll get to it in a second. But I do think, even though we're not going to go play-by-play over the UCLA game, I think it's worth spending half a second explaining why this loss is just so different and so crippling at this exact moment in time. It's not just that you lost to UCLA. It's not just that UCLA was 0-4. But really, if you were James Franklin, there are 2 reasons that this loss on Saturday to UCLA was just devastating. One, and this is sort of a credit to James Franklin. I feel like everyone's just tearing down James Franklin. This is sort of a credit. James Franklin doesn't lose to bad teams. Like, that is the thing about James Franklin that no matter how you feel about him, you can never criticize, is this is a guy that beats the teams that he is supposed to. We shared the stat on Sunday's show. He had, how about this? He had, I believe the stat was, I'm doing it off the top of my head now, but take out year one and the COVID year where everything was wonky. One loss in the other 10 years that he has been head coach to a team that finished below 500 in the regular season. You go from 2022, 2023, 2024, the last 3 years, his only losses, were to top 10 teams. And yes, at some point you want to get over the hump over top 10 teams, but at least you're beating everybody else. And that is what changed the dynamic on Saturday. You lose to a UCLA team that is 0-4. You lose to a UCLA team that, this is still the craziest stat, they never had a lead at any point in any game before they played Penn State. And it's not like they played, murderer's row of teams. They played New Mexico, UNLV, Northwestern, and Utah, the only team of that group that's probably very good. And so I just bring it up because that's what makes this one different. And what also makes it different, it's not only that for the first time in pretty much forever, you lost to a lousy team, it's that you also lost to a lousy team in what is essentially the make or break season of your career. Okay, I remember talking about this back in August. The idea that there was really, in my opinion, only one team that really was national championship or bust, and it was the Penn State Nittany Lions, right? I mean, everybody else you could talk about: Ohio State, entirely new roster; Texas, first-year quarterback; Georgia, a lot of new pieces; Alabama, second-year head coach. For James Franklin and Penn State, they have been building towards this season for 3 years, and the thing about it is they haven't ducked from that smoke either. This was a team and a program that basically said, look, 2023 was Michigan's year. Bunch of veteran players come back, compete for a national championship. Last year was Ohio State. This year, it's our turn. We spent a lot of money in the portal to upgrade our roster. We spent a lot of money to retain players that could be playing on Sundays right now in the NFL. And we spent a lot of money to upgrade our coaching staff with the best defensive coordinator in college football. And so to lose that game, to fall to 3-2 and 0-2 in the Big Ten, it's just crippling, because in a natty or bust season, you're probably not going to make the playoff this year. You probably have to win out. That would include a win over Ohio State in Columbus. Yeah, we have a 9-year track record that you cannot beat Ohio State, period. So it was just the worst possible loss at the worst possible time, and it's devastating for James Franklin. And so with it, if you listen to Sunday's show, we talked a lot about the idea of maybe it's time for James Franklin to look for an exit out of Penn State, right? And again, I will actually give James Franklin a little bit of credit here, because I know I'm going to list a bunch of schools and those fan bases like, I don't want James Franklin. I don't want. Okay. The guy wins 75% of his games. And I understand 0-2 against Oregon the last 2 years, doesn't beat Ohio State, didn't beat Michigan when they were really rolling. But the counter to that is there's a lot of schools that could do a lot worse. And what I find very interesting about the state of things with James Franklin is when I shared that sentiment on Sunday's show, I kind of wondered, am I the only one that thinks this way? Well, no. It's been interesting. Virtually every major voice in college sports media has kind of said the same thing. The Athletic dropped an article about James Franklin maybe looking for an escape from Penn State. The NBC Sports, Nicole Auerbach, by the way, it was Chris Vanini who wrote that article for The Athletic. Nicole Auerbach, who actually covers the Big Ten for NBC, wrote an article about it. But I thought the best one that really kind of laid out what's at stake for James Franklin, what's at stake for a potential future employer, it is John Talty's article from CBS. Long article. And we found a little bit of an excerpt of it. It's a little bit of a longer excerpt, but I think it really lays out the situation that both James Franklin is in and Penn State is in going forward. Let's take a look at some of that article whenever you're ready, producer Matt. All right. It's from John Talty, CBS. A little bit long, but I want to give context. So James Franklin has won too much and is owed too much money, nearly $50 million for Penn State to fire him. His contract runs through 2031, and at this point, athletic director Pat Kraft has been nothing but supportive of this program's second winningest head coach. Unless the wheels fall off absolutely and Penn State goes winless the rest of the season, that's not happening, Penn State isn't paying $50 million to get rid of a guy who has won at least 10 games each of the last 3 seasons. The article continues. But a little pressure could help him onto another program that values a high floor more than a championship level ceiling. In what figures to be an extremely active coaching carousel, this may be the time for Franklin to leave State College and head elsewhere. In industry circles, Franklin has been a rumored name to keep in mind for Florida for more than a year now, but the pressure is just as high in Gainesville as it is in State College, and the optics of Florida hiring a coach who lost to UCLA on the same day Florida beat Billy Napier beat Texas is somewhat hilarious. And it continues. So what are the other options? Auburn head coach James Franklin, Wisconsin head coach James Franklin. Is Virginia Tech too far a step down for Franklin to consider? There could be quite a few attractive job openings for Franklin and his super agent Jimmy Sexton to consider this year. A lot of thoughts on that. So first of all, really good encapsulation by John Talty. And again, people, every single time that I say, could a coach be on the move, it doesn't mean that they're getting fired. I want to put that out there, right? Because I talked about it with Dabo. I talked about it with Mark Stoops. The buyout is this. The buyout is that. Okay, let's remember always that buyouts work 2 ways. There is the amount a school would owe a coach if they fired him. For James Franklin, it's $50 million. For Dabo Swinney, it's $60 million. For Mark Stoops, it's $40 million paid out over about 60 days. None of those buyouts allow the current school that they are at to fire them, and they're not getting fired. By the way, let the record show Penn State shouldn't fire James Franklin. I looked it up. Take out year 1 and year 2 when he was coming off of a program with sanctions. He's won 75% of his games. He should not be fired. But that doesn't mean it hasn't run full circle, which brings me to the other part of buyouts. I understand he's not getting fired for $50 million, as John Talty said in that article. But he would only owe any school that he leaves for $2 million if he were to leave. So if Penn State fired James Franklin, they would owe him $50 million. If he voluntarily leaves for another job, he would owe Penn State $2 million. So yes, it is absolutely in play that he would consider leaving. I think it's worth noting this is an important part. This is a guy that he has not been afraid to flirt with other jobs when he thinks that he is underappreciated at Penn State. We talked about it the other day, but 2021, ironically, the last time he lost to an unranked opponent, that was Illinois, like 7 overtimes, whatever. First year of the new overtime rule with 2-point conversions. It was so stupid. It was America's introduction to 2-point conversion overtime. So dumb. Anyway, I digress. I bring it up because 2021, that was the year USC opened in September. It might have even been August. I think they played week 0 and week 1, got fired after week 1, but he got fired either late September or late August, early September. Coach O got fired mid-October. And so I bring it up because of the fact that when there were openings that are of high caliber, James Franklin's name has been linked to them. Not afraid to flirt to get a new contract, not afraid to flirt to maybe even get a new job. And so I think it's in play. I don't think he'll be afraid. And if he feels like one of 2 things, either it's run its full course at Penn State, or 2, it's not going to happen at Penn State and he needs to get out, then I think, and by the way, those are kind of the same things, but the point I'm trying to make is basically if he feels like he's either not going to get support, the fans don't want him there, or there is a good opportunity for him to leave, I think he's actually going to really seriously consider it. Because the thing that I keep going back to, everything was built towards this year. Remember, and the other thing too, I mentioned about all the money they spent on Drew Aller and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and whatever, portal, coaches, whatever. The inverse of that is that this was also a year Ohio State lost basically everybody off of a national championship run. Oregon lost basically everybody off of a team that went 12-0 in the regular season, 13-0 going into the playoff, and was the number 1 overall seed. You look across Michigan, true freshman at quarterback. Nebraska feels like they're maybe a year away from being really something special. USC, to Lincoln Riley's credit, I don't know if he'll ever figure it out, but it's in a better place than it's never going to be easier than it was this year. And I think James Franklin has to seriously consider an escape, seriously consider moving on, because the other thing is, too, I was thinking about this morning, is the Big Ten's not going to get easier. That's one. It's never going to be set up better. And here's the other thing. If the boosters don't believe in you, they ain't going to give you the money that they gave you this offseason to make the coaching changes you need and the roster upgrades that you need. And even in a rev share world where the school is paying a lot of the salary, you're going to need outside booster support. I don't know that he's going to get it. So the big question is, do any of those schools actually make sense? And I think a few of them do. First of all, John Talty mentioned Florida, that James Franklin, even last year, his name was linked to Florida. Now, it's funny because I saw in that article, he did say something about it would be, how could you sell James Franklin losing to UCLA the day that Billy Napier beat? I don't think that matters. Like by December when that job is going to open or December when a hire is going to be made, I don't know that anybody's like, hey, everybody remember back on October 3rd or 4th or whatever it was when Billy Napier beat Texas and Penn State lost to UCLA? Like nobody's going to remember that. Transparently, Texas may stink. I think Texas is going to probably lose this weekend to Oklahoma. They're going to be 3-3 with 0 good wins if that happens. The point I'm trying to make, I don't think it really matters. I think the bigger question is, would he make sense at Florida? And I think it'd be really interesting because I think there are two sides to the coin at Florida. I think one, if Lane Kiffin doesn't want that job, and I do think he would, but if Lane Kiffin doesn't want that job, I think there's not a lot of super obvious candidates for the Florida job. And then the other thing with Lane Kiffin, if they make the college football playoff, he may be playing into the middle or end of December. And so if Lane Kiffin doesn't want the job, I don't know who the realistic candidates are for that gig. And so maybe James Franklin is the best that Florida can do. I know that Florida fans, I don't know that they would love that. But I think the counter to that is like James Franklin wins 10 games a year. And maybe even at Florida, that's not possible with the state of the SEC. But again, it's better than what you got right now. At least James Franklin's teams beat the teams they're supposed to up until the UCLA game. I actually think Florida could do worse than James Franklin. I do also think there's kind of the interesting thing of recruiting hasn't been Billy Napier's issue. Game day operations have been, clock management have been, coaching hirings have been. It feels like you're trading in, Billy Napier for the slightly more successful Billy Napier. I don't know that one would be great because it's a lot of the same things that drive you crazy about Billy Napier. You'd be bringing in with a slightly more successful head coach. But again, if Lane Kiffin's not available, how much worse could it be? The article, John Talty, CBS, mentions Auburn. It's going to be an interesting few weeks at Auburn. Producer Matt shaking his head. Producer Matt's head in hands. Dark times at Auburn right now. I'll say this. They host Georgia this weekend. They're only like a 2.5-point underdog in the Circus Sportsbook. I think it's easy to sit there and say that the situation in Auburn is dire. They also played two really good teams on the road and could have won either of those games. I'm not saying they're going to beat Georgia this weekend, but if they don't, that would be 3 straight losses with Missouri coming to town the following week. Missouri's a top 20 team right now. And Missouri, by the way, is a slight underdog against Alabama with the money coming in on Missouri. So there's a chance you play Georgia this weekend. No matter what happens, you're playing Missouri the following week. Both two more top 10, top 15 teams. You could be looking at 4 straight losses going into the middle of October. What would that mean for Hugh Freeze's future? Could James Franklin be a candidate there? I think he would absolutely be a candidate there if they got rid of Hugh Freeze. And I think the thing about James Franklin that is interesting is you would owe Hugh Freeze a big buyout just like you would at Florida. You can get James Franklin, I don't want to say on the cheap, but if you can get him out of his contract for $2 million, makes life a little bit easier. The other jobs, I think they're the ones that we kind of talked about the other day. We didn't mention Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Luke Fickell stuff is some of the weirdest things. I don't know that I've ever seen a hire that was more universally beloved that has crashed and burned harder than Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. I think the comparison would probably be Scott Frost in Nebraska. But Scott Frost only had one good year before he got the Nebraska jobs. Luke Fickell was awesome for like 7 years. Goes to Wisconsin, it's been a train wreck. I don't know how much longer they're going to be patient with him. I think if it's not this year, he's probably got one more year. I don't know that James Franklin would go to Wisconsin, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Virginia Tech, to me, is an interesting one. You stay in that area, you have an opportunity to recruit a lot of the same areas, and you go to a conference where you can win games. And say this about James Franklin. He could build a really good team at Virginia Tech and beat up on the bottom feeders of the ACC, something that he's done in the Big Ten, something that's going to be harder to do in the Big Ten as the Big Ten gets better. Lastly, and I mentioned this the other day, I know it sounds crazy because they're the team that might have forced him out of Penn State. I actually think UCLA could do a lot worse than James Franklin. I mean, they'd have to commit financially to the things that he needs, not from a staffing perspective, front office perspective, NIL perspective. But UCLA's just been so up and down. And I think the big thing, like people forget, Chip Kelly had some good years at UCLA, but he never wanted to do the outside work. He never wanted to do the media stuff. He never wanted to do the booster stuff. He never wanted to shake hands, do all that. I think that's arguably what James Franklin does the best. And you talk about a guy that could inspire a fan base, that could get people fired up to show back to the Rose Bowl. Like I said, I think you could do a lot worse than James Franklin if you were UCLA, but I do find it interesting. All of these big names in the media, including yours truly, if you want to call me that, I don't know. You can call me a big name if you want. It's up to you. I don't really care. The point I'm trying to make, Nicole Auerbach, John Talty, Chris Vanini, I mean, a lot of people are now saying like kind of probably makes a little bit of sense to consider leaving Penn State if you're James Franklin. You can get out of that contract. And so the question becomes, who would actually be interested? And I think there will be teams interested if that's the route that James Franklin decides. By the way, they could just do this crazy thing, run the table, beat Ohio State, and it's a non-issue. Again, we have no track record that James Franklin can do that. But, I'll tell you what, I think they could do a lot worse than James Franklin. All right, this is what we're going to do. By the way, I already see Gators fans in the chat saying, hell no to James Franklin at Florida. Fatal Gator, if there is a candidate, I'd actually be curious for your perspective on who would be a good candidate at Florida. Because again, what if Lane Kiffin makes a run to the college football semifinals? He's going to be coaching into mid-January. He will not be a candidate. I don't know who would be a candidate from there. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. You know who's not a candidate for the Penn State job? You know who's actually in a much worse situation than James Franklin at Penn State? Bill Belichick at UNC. An unbelievably damning article about Bill Belichick came out on Monday. That place is a train wreck. That place is a disaster. We'll talk about that. And then we will talk a little hoops. Number one recruit in America, Tyran Stokes, appears set to commit. We'll discuss all that. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year two is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So do want to keep the conversation going about some coaches that maybe things aren't really going well for, and we want to continue the conversation at North Carolina. Speaking of North Carolina, probably plenty of good tickets still available to all these North Carolina games. You know where you can get good tickets if it's not easy to get good tickets? Our friends, our partners. I'm talking about SeatGeek. Okay, so SeatGeek is America's #1 ticketing app. 28 million downloads. Unbelievable. 28 million downloads. The thing that I love about SeatGeek, there's two things really. One, You can pick your own tickets, and they not only pick your own tickets, but they rate every ticket 1 through 10. So you know if you're getting a good ticket. Green means go ahead and purchase. Red means maybe that's not the ticket for you. But they just take care of you. And the one thing they really take care of is listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. How about this? For listeners of the Aaron Torres pod, this is awesome. You know how I have a code for you all. You can use code Torres for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code Torres when you buy tickets at SeatGeek.com. Yes, you heard that correctly. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. And by the way, not just college football. College basketball is coming. NFL, Major League playoffs, concert shows. If they're selling tickets on SeatGeek, promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. All right. Let's keep the conversation going. We just talked about James Franklin. Kind of a little bit of a mess at Penn State. You know what's a way bigger mess than Penn State and James Franklin right now? The North Carolina Tar Heels. And so I'll be honest, like with North Carolina, I think my opinion, if you were listening to this show a year ago, and we've had so many new listeners, we appreciate everybody. If you were listening a year ago, like I think I was actually in the middle on Bill Belichick in North Carolina. Like I think there were a lot of people that were like, it's going to be a train wreck. And then there were some that were like, he's won 6 Super Bowls. He's going to be great. And I was kind of in the middle. I was kind of like, well, on the one hand, he's kind of selling this whole notion of we're the 33rd NFL team and we have NIL money and I have a professional background and we have a front office infrastructure that you've never seen before in college football. And I was like, well, wait a second now. Everybody's got NIL money. So like, oh, cool. You raised $20 million in NIL. Guess what? You know who else has $20 million? Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Texas A&M, Florida. I mean, everybody's got NIL money. And so I was never sold that he was going to bring anything to college football that college football hadn't seen before. You still need players. And I still said, like, him recruiting against Dan Lanning, him recruiting against Kirby Smart. Listen, we could criticize James Franklin for a lot. Recruiting is not an issue. So it's like, how many of those recruiting battles were you going to win? And it doesn't matter if you don't have the players, right? But conversely, I also said this. I said a few things. I said, one, he's going to the ACC. If he was going to the SEC, I don't know that I would feel the same way, but he's going to the ACC. There's so many wins on the schedule. He's going to be fine. He's going to be this. You know, at the very least, the defense is going to be elite. And then from there, can you scratch together enough points on offense? And I thought, I thought he could go 7-5. I thought he could go 8-4. Well, we may have to flip that because right now the North Carolina Tar Heels are 2-3 overall. I would argue while their schedule isn't tough, there are now all of a sudden games that look a lot tougher given North Carolina's stature and how they've played through a couple games. And so the point I'm trying to make, it's a total disaster. It's certainly gone worse than I expected. 2-3, 0-3 against power conference teams. Basically, by the way, the power conference teams, it's not even like they're losing to good teams. Clemson was 1-3 coming into that game Saturday and destroyed North Carolina. UCF, I give Scott Frost credit. He's been better than I thought, but he's 3-2 overall. It's not like he's lighting the world on fire at UCF. TCU was another team that I thought was going to be this juggernaut. I thought maybe TCU was just better than we thought. Well, TCU lost at Arizona State a few weeks ago and is 4-1 and solid, but certainly not unbeatable. I think beyond that, it's not just that the record stinks. The production and quality of play stinks. I mean, you watch this. This team is unwatchable. 3 games against power conference teams. This is what they've done. They lost 48-14 to TCU, 34-9 to UCF, 38-10 to Clemson. Not great at math, but that's 35 points through 3 power conference games. That comes out to about 12 points per game against power conference teams, 133rd nationally in total offense. And I think what's crazy is, to the point that I made a minute ago, the defense hasn't been good either. That's the crazy part. I think they're like ranked 82nd or something in the country in total defense. 38 points allowed to Clemson, 34 allowed to UCF, 48 allowed to TCU. And so clearly it's not going well. I did see somebody in the chat say you got to give him time to get in his players. And to a degree, I believe it. But if you're paying attention There is stuff going on behind the scenes that is clearly way worse than we realized and clearly more chaotic than we realized. Really quick, Matt, before we get to the article, I didn't even mention this to you, Matt, but the story that came out on, I guess it would have been Monday morning, that the North Carolina social media team was not allowed to post anything positive about New England Patriots players. Of course, Bill Belichick came from New England. That's problematic because, the most prominent North Carolina player in the NFL right now is Drake May, who just led an upset win against the best team maybe in the NFL, against the Buffalo Bills. And there was a big lag between when the social media team posted something and then they posted something and then everybody knew that the story had gotten out. So it's a disaster. But as bad as I thought it was, I'll say this. I want to give credit. WRAL, that is the NBC affiliate in North Carolina that covers the team. Support local journalism, people, at least in North Carolina with WRAL. They did an incredible deep dive piece on the state of the program, everything that's going wrong. And I'll say this, the article should have just been titled, "Everything That Could Go Wrong Is Going Wrong." But I think it was shocking just how many things are an issue, from the way he handles his team, to discipline, to accountability, to the way he communicates, to the coaching staff. I mean, it just should have been Trainwreck starring Bill Belichick. Like, it was that bad. I'll be honest, I had trouble limiting the number of quotes from the article that I wanted to share because it's so bad. Let's just get to a couple that kind of explains just how bad this is. Again, this is from WRAL in North Carolina. The first one, according to sources, there's a board. And so, by the way, let me set this up. You can leave this on the screen, Matt. So let me set this up. So there was a big section about basically how there is certain preference for players that came in the transfer portal as opposed that stayed from the Mac Brown era. Okay. And so I bring it up. They started naming individual players. It was anonymous sources. I didn't think it was fair to include all of the individual players, but this was part of that conversation about how certain players have preferential treatment, specifically the ones recruited by Belichick and his coaching staff as opposed to the previous one. According to sources, there's a board in the UNC football facility that lists people who have missed workouts in class. Some Belichick recruited players repeatedly show up on that list, but have not had their playing time affected. Again, WRAL, North Carolina, Pat Welter. Matt, we could just go ahead and go to the second one and then we'll break it all down. And again, these are just a couple of the quotes. I could have literally done the whole article, but I saved you some time. I want to get you over to that article. It says, his ability to communicate with players and parents has also furthered the divide. According to sources, the players who chose to stay at North Carolina after Mac Brown's firing didn't meet with Belichick for weeks after he was hired. Parents were told not to approach Belichick. They didn't meet Belichick and his staff until the practice like a pro spring game. So again, took the job in December. Parents of returning players did not meet Belichick or the staff until the spring game in probably late March or early April. The article continued. There's been no communication with coaches and parents, period. A parent of a current North Carolina player said, none, zero, zilch, not one email from a coach, one text, one phone call, nothing. And so again, by the way, didn't include the part about the coaching staff, didn't include the part about a lot of different things, but I think that just paints a picture for how chaotic it is. And I actually want to dive into half a second of those things. First of all, the thing about players missing workouts and not being held accountable, that was like shocking to me, because the thing about Belichick, whatever you think about Belichick and how much did Brady have a role in this and that, the one thing you could always count on with Bill Belichick was the idea that like players were going to be held to a certain standard, right? And if you weren't all in, he was booting you all out. Like I was thinking about this as I was prepping for the show on Tuesday morning. He benched his best cornerback, Malcolm Butler, in a Super Bowl. And we still don't know what happened. But clearly the player did something, either showed up late or wasn't accountable or did this or did that. No one to this day knows why Malcolm Butler was benched in the Super Bowl. That coach is now letting players show up late or skip workouts and still not holding them accountable. So you have that. By the way, I remember there was another story. Like I think there was a player like on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football. It was a running back. I remember he rushed for like 150 yards, then showed up late to the facility later that week and got cut after he rushed for 150. So Belichick was the ultimate accountability guy. Now players are, quote, repeatedly showing up on the list as late, but have not had their playing time affected. That's not the Bill Belichick I know, people. What's the old meme? Mark Jackson, what happened to the game I love? What happened to the Bill Belichick I love? I think beyond that, the second quote, the part about being zero communication with coaches and parents, that to me is as important. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, that to me is not that surprising. And to me, I know I said to me 7 times there, I apologize. But paraphrasing, to me, that is the most important thing. And that was the biggest thing about Belichick coming to college that I was worried about personally is, listen, I understand this notion of, oh my goodness, we have this new system and it's a pro style and it's going to work in college. Okay, cool. But at the end of the day, they are 2 fundamentally different sports, and it takes 2 fundamentally different skill sets to achieve at the highest level. Bottom line is, I know we're paying college athletes like they're professionals now. And I, maybe more than anybody, has zero sympathy if you don't do what you need to do and schools kick you to the curb. You know, if Texas decides to move off Arch Manning this year because he's not good enough, I'm sorry, I don't feel bad. Dude is making $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million, whatever it is. I don't feel bad. If, you know, Nico Iamaleava struggling because he left a better situation at Tennessee for UCLA, I'm less sympathetic because we know it was over money, okay? But at the end of the day, there is still a baseline thing that college coaches have to do in terms of, you know, kind of communicating with players and getting with players. And this isn't the NFL. In the NFL, guys understand this is their job. They have wives. They have kids. They don't have time to sit in your office and tell you about what's going on. In college, it's the opposite. Many of them are away from home for the first time. Many of them, don't forget, are coming from all sorts of places, all different circumstances. You know, 70 new players. It's 70 new just guys that are in a new place. They don't know what to expect. They don't know anything about the coaching staff. And it's just, you need to be more accountable and you need to be more present. Or here's the thing. If you're not going to be, you have to put a staff in place that is. And that's the thing I think maybe even for me, I don't know that I realized how bad it was until the season started. Not just is Bill Belichick going to work, but does he even have anything resembling the right staff? Now, they went through the staff in the article they mentioned. Mike Lombardi's the GM. He's been out of football for about 8-9 years now, was at VSiN, was doing media stuff. Mike Lombardi's son is the quarterback's coach, had no real coaching experience before getting this job. Steve Belichick, who outside of last year at Washington had only worked for his father, is the defensive coordinator. Bill Belichick's younger son, who essentially had no coaching experience outside of working for his father, is, I want to say, the DB's coach or some sort of position coach. A couple former Patriots players with no coaching. And so it's not just that Bill Belichick is new to college football. It's not just that transparently they took the wrong approach of, oh, we're the 33rd NFL team. You have to have people in place that understand the ecosystem, right? I do a podcast every day. If this podcast went live on TV every day, I would talk to TV people how to make it better than as a TV product, you know, whatever. You get the point, is that you have to have people that understand the ecosystem and the environment that you're walking into. And it's clear that Belichick and his people do not. That's the crazy part to me, is it's so obvious that in over his head is probably not the right word, but that it's just not going to be a good fit. Tiger can't change his stripes. A leopard can't change its spots, right? And Bill Belichick is not the kind of guy that is going to be able to put together good rosters in college football. Like, good players, listen, maybe on defense, maybe a linebacker, a secondary guy, whatever. But again, a couple things. One, you have to have the guys on the staff that have the relationships to put you in position to get those good players, right? I mean, you know, whatever. I don't know that Mike Lombardi, who's been out of football for 10 years and has never been in college in 30 years, 40 years. I think 1982 was like the last time he coached in college. I don't know that that guy is going to be the guy that has the relationships that you need to get the players in your door. And then more importantly, I don't know that Bill Belichick has the personality to close the deal. We haven't heard a lot of stories of players from the transfer portal, but they went after all the big ones. They had a meeting with John Mateer. They had a meeting with a couple other guys, and they couldn't really land the guys that you need to make a difference. And I think it's because they have the wrong people in place and they have the wrong head coach to close recruits. I mean, you go back to when Nick Saban was a head coach. Yeah, he was a little grumpy once you got to campus, but in a parent's home, in a kid's home, in grandma's home, how many videos did we see of him dancing, of him, smiling, of him hugging grandma, of him doing whatever? And that's what it takes to recruit and win at the highest level. And so I could go on, but I'm a guy. Like I said, I was a little bit defensive of this hire. Like I thought it could potentially work. All of a sudden, I'm looking at it right now, and I think it's going to end poorly because part of it is, too, the schedule just looks tougher. Virginia is now a top 20 team. North Carolina has a bye this week. They play them in 2 weeks. They're not beating Virginia. They play at Cal next weekend. Cal's not a bad team. They're 4-2 overall, even though they got smoked by Duke the other day. Bet on that game. Whoops. By the way, Duke is good. Duke with Darian Mensah is all of a sudden playing really good football, 3-0 in ACC play. You go on and on down the list. Syracuse. Yeah, Syracuse is 3-3, but they smacked Clemson. NC State is 4-2. And so all of a sudden, I thought worst case scenario, 7-5, 8-4. But as I said, I think we might have to flip those numbers because I think realistically we could be looking at not 7-4 or not 7-5, excuse me, but I think 5-7 is the ceiling. And I think it could be a 3-9 and 4-8. Now I'll say last thought because I want to get to some Tyran Stokes stuff. I would just be curious. How long, not only does North Carolina stay patient, but how long does he stay patient at the college level? I think it's clear this is not what he thought it was going to be. I think it's clear, by the way, there were a lot of distractions in his life that he maybe never had up until the last year or two. You can probably put together what those are. North Carolina, he's another one, by the way, much like James Franklin, much like Dabo Swinney, much like Mark Stoops, that cannot be fired. I think it's a $20 million buyout after this year. But I wonder if after this year, next year, whatever, if he just says, you know what, this is not for me, I got to go in another direction. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we do, we're going to go in another direction ourselves. Tyran Stokes, number 1 recruit in America, cut his list to 5. This is a basketball recruit, by the way. Cut his list to 5. Crystal balls are coming in. I think I know where he's going to go. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, you know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to go ahead and thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Yeah, you see the logo on the back of the screen right here. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauley Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge sports fan. And one day he was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to love, something my family's going to love, something I'm going to love. And so he came up with Cauley Puffs. This is the new age health food snack. You don't need to go to the grocery aisle and buy all that crap, the Doritos, the Fritos. No, my friends, you need Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But here's the best part. They taste freaking delicious. Actually, there's another best part. In addition to tasting delicious, in addition to being healthy, they are also taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Okay, so check this out. All you got to do is go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, and you can get 15% off any purchase with the promo code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. It's that simple. 15% off any purchase. 1 bag to try them out, 100 bags to cater a party. Doesn't really matter. Promo code Torres. CauleyPuffs.com gets you 15% off. Cauley Puffs also available on Amazon. You obviously can't get the promo code there, but CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to our friends at Cauley Puffs. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. By the way, Matt, it looks like Fatal Gator has some good stuff on the Gators coaching search. We'll get to that maybe to wrap the show. Any other questions, comments, feel free to kind of pull them aside. With that said, I want to go ahead. I want to talk a little college hoops. First of all, college hoops is coming quick, man. 4 weeks from last Monday, so yesterday as I record here, opening night, Florida versus Arizona, BYU versus Villanova in Vegas. I'll be at those games. Probably do an event from Circa as well. We'll keep you posted on that. Oh, by the way, AP poll comes out next Monday. With that said, what's also interesting is it feels like we are finally starting to make some headway in recruiting, where I think a lot of the best players have kind of been in a holding pattern trying to figure out the situation with NIL, rev share, whatever. And it feels like the player we have talked about the most, the number one recruit in America, appears to be ready to come off the board. Tyran Stokes, 6'7", forward, originally from Louisville, plays his high school ball about a mile from where you see that little finger right there, about a mile from where this finger is. Tyran Stokes plays basketball at Notre Dame High School, Sherman Oaks, California. Okay, great player. We're going to get to the recruitment in a minute. If you're watching this, you know the kind of player that he is. 6'7", power guard. I mean, just can get to the rim, can finish. I've said it a million times. I love the way that he played for Team USA this summer because he was playing with AJ DeBonta. He was playing with Mikael Brown Jr. and really found that role of, I'm going to be just the dude that does all the little things, comes off the bench and provides a bunch of scoring, a bunch of toughness, a bunch of whatever. But then conversely, also on top of that, is just the type of player that you can build around and can be a star. I think he's probably the only player in the class of 2026 that can come in as a one and done and be like a true like dude, the way that Cooper Flagg was a dude last year, the way that I think we all think AJ DeBonta is going to be, Darren Peterson's going to be, who else? Cam Boozer, Brandon Miller. I just said Darren Miller. Brandon Miller was at Alabama. I think Tyran Stokes is the only player in the class of 2026 that can be that kind of guy. And so you can see where his recruitment would be very interesting. So let's get to the updates with the recruitment. First of all, last Friday, what Border League was basically going on. Border League is a big, it's like a high school AAU event basically in Vegas. I was supposed to be out there. I was out there for the NIL event. But I just bring it up because at Border League, he announced his official top five, final five. They were Kentucky, Louisville, Oregon, USC, and Kansas. And so the top five got announced. And then basically, just as soon as that top five got announced, there was a crystal ball for the University of Kentucky. We posted it on our Torres on UK account. By the way, this one is official. We may have accidentally posted a fake crystal ball from a burner account a few days ago. This one is real from 24/7 Sports. They have Tyran Stokes expected to commit to Kentucky. I'll say this. I think he is going to end up at Kentucky, and I think the commitment could come soon. His 18th birthday, by the way, happy birthday, Tyran Stokes, is this Sunday, October 12th. I think it is going to come right around them, maybe as early as Friday, maybe right around his birthday, maybe into early next week. But I let me put it this way. I don't think that this is a recruitment that is going to go on for months and months. And just because he cut his, let me put it this way. It ain't going to be Nate Ament who cut his list to 5 in like November and committed in April. And every week was just taking another random visit. Like I think this kid, has a pretty good feel for where he wants to go. And I'll be transparent. I do think it's Kentucky. I'll be careful though, because in the past I have made not blatant, but I've made this is going to happen, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So I'm going to be careful, but I do think it's Kentucky. And I think part of why it's Kentucky, I do think you can start to eliminate some other schools. I think USC is a great spot for a lot of people. I understand that, Eric Musselman, first of all, and I've said this, like, I think we forget how good of a recruiter Eric Musselman is. At Arkansas, got in Anthony Black, got in Nick Smith Jr., Ron Holland would have gone there if he had gone to college. He was in that last group of G League Ignite players. Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, who's now an NBA champion. You go on and on down the list. So Coach Muss is a great recruiter, and Tyran Stokes is playing and living in LA right now. I'll be honest, I don't think that's going to be a fit, okay? Kansas. I know last week there was Taylor Kinney saying, I'm recruiting Tyran Stokes. And I think even right after that, there was a little bit of Kansas buzz. I'm going to tell you right now, as of 11:51 Eastern time, always subject to change on October 7th. I don't think it's going to be Kansas. I think it's worth noting Tyran Stokes did officially sign an NIL deal with Nike last week. To me, that's a pretty good indicator that it's probably not going to be an Adidas school. I know that that's not a be-all, end-all. We've talked about it. Cooper Flagg signed with New Balance, still ended up at Duke. Now, it's worth noting, by the way, Cooper Flagg signed with New Balance after he ended up at Duke and after he was already on campus. Darius Acuff is at Arkansas. He has signed with Reebok. That's a little bit different. He had been committed and signed to Arkansas for months, not to mention that there are no Reebok schools. So it's not like he could go to this school that's sponsored by Reebok. They don't exist. So I just bring it up because the shoe affiliation probably isn't as important as it once was. But I find it hard to believe that Nike is going to commit to this kid and let him just walk to another place. Doesn't make sense to me. And so I think it's going to be a Nike school. I don't think it's going to be Kansas. Like I said, there was some buzz a week ago, but I don't think it's going to be Kansas. As far as Louisville, it's funny with Louisville. I actually did a little bit of homework on this one. And it's interesting, right? Because Louisville was perceived to be a favorite for quite some time. What I have since found out, by the way, Tyran Stokes is originally from Louisville, so that's the Louisville-Kentucky connection. They were perceived to be the favorite. I believe they got his first official visit. He visited Louisville, Kansas in the spring. But I bring it up because I think the more time has gone on, Louisville has faded. Now, listen, I know Kentucky fans are going to say, oh, my goodness, Louisville poverty program. I don't think it's that at all. I do think what it is to me more than anything, honestly, is just that I think maybe he was never I don't think Louisville was ever in as good a position for Tyran Stokes as I think a lot of people may have thought. I was talking to somebody who I trust, and I think what we have to remember, a lot of these players have big camps. They have an agent, they have somebody that kind of helps them with stuff. They have mom, they have dad, they have whoever, they have their own opinions. And what I was kind of told, and I think it kind of lines up with everything, is that I think there was maybe people or someone in Tyran Stokes' camp that wanted Louisville, and maybe they were maybe a little bit more vocal than, I don't want to say they should have been, but like I said, let me, and this isn't a negative, by the way, I want to be clear with that, is you hear stories all the time about, dad really liked that school, but mom liked that school, but the player liked that school. I know of one really prominent transfer this offseason that it was like the agent was really pushing for one school. Dad kind of felt like there was another spot, and the kid wanted to go someplace else, and he ended up going someplace else. And so I think with Louisville, what I've kind of uncovered, if you will, the last couple of days is that I do think, and I do wonder if maybe there was somebody that wanted Louisville maybe a little bit more than Tyran did. And I don't know how much of a factor Louisville really was for Tyran. And then I think on top of it, there's also the variable of Adidas school, all of that. And so because of it, I think it's a tough sell. Again, when you're an Adidas school, I think your backs up against the wall. I know everybody's crapping on Louisville right now. I don't know that they were ever as much of a favorite as they were perceived. Brings us to Oregon and Kentucky, and I'll just say this. Listen, could it be Oregon? Of course. Oregon it's the premier Nike school. They can do true NIL with Nike in ways that maybe other schools can't. It could be Oregon, and I think if it's not Kentucky, it will be Oregon. But I do think it is Kentucky. And again, a lot of people have been burned by predictions for Kentucky in the past. I remember last spring, I said Lamar Wilkerson. I felt really good that he was going to Kentucky. Donovan Dent, we did a video. It was down to Kentucky or UCLA, and I kind of felt like it was UCLA. I don't know if they could keep up. But for Kentucky, it just makes too much sense. First of all, the offense, the system, you're going to be playing with other really good players in a high-octane system. Like if you're Tyran Stokes, let me put it this way. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to be honest. Are you really going to go to Oregon with a coach who every single year it feels like is on the precipice of retirement? I know they basically make the tournament every year, but I don't know. It feels weird. Like there's not a 0% chance that the coach could retire before you get there. He's in his 70s, I think, at this point. Kentucky is the home state school. High octane offense. You'd be the face of the program. I think the other thing too with Kentucky that's worth noting, if you remember that story that we talked about over the spring or in the summer, Matt Norlander basically reported that Kentucky is going to give more of their rev share money to basketball than probably any school in the country, or at least any Power 4 school. For people, I'll be quick, side tangent. I know I'm all over the place, but again, rev share. What is rev share? every school is allowed to pay its athletes $20.5 million. Okay. So that comes directly from the school. You can get NIL outside of rev share, but from the school directly, they are allowed to pay $20.5 million to the entire athletic department. Okay. And so virtually every school in America is basically breaking it down the same way. Football is going to get like 80 to 85% of the rev share. Men's basketball is probably going to get 10 to 15%, maybe 20% in a handful of select cases. And then everybody gets everything else, the 3 to 5 to 8% that's left over. Okay. And the math is going to change a little bit at every school, but there's no requirement that football does get a certain percentage. There's no requirement that football does get 80%, that football does get 85%. And what's interesting about it is there was actually a story from the summer that Greg Sankey in the SEC was trying to put universal caps on each program. Football can only spend this much percentage. Basketball can only spend this much percentage. Whatever. Baseball cannot spend more than this. And the school that opposed it more than anybody? It was Kentucky. Kentucky did not want a cap on its basketball program. And basically, Kentucky never wanted to be in a situation where they're even on a level playing field with everybody else. They said, look, we're Kentucky. We're different. We're not going to, if we want to spend $10 million on our basketball roster, we should be allowed to do it. And so the Matt Norlander report from over the summer, if you remember, was that Kentucky might be willing to pay like upwards of, 40 to 45% of its rev share, 40 to 45% of that $20.5 million pot on its basketball program. Now, I know Mark Stoops denied that after the fact, but of course he's going to deny it. What is he going to say? I'm a poverty program and I have no chance to compete because my school's not going to support me? No. Now, I will say I think it's interesting as to what that would mean for a potential Kentucky basketball coaching or Kentucky football coaching search, but that's another conversation for another day. I think the bottom line is whatever the upper tier of Power 4 schools spending in NIL, I think it's fair to say that Kentucky is going to be in the 1% of 1%, and we shouldn't be surprised by that because of the fact that, again, it's Kentucky. It is. People could say, it is different, respectfully, than even Florida, Texas, Purdue, India. Like, it's different. And so to me, I'm not surprised that Matt Norlander report came out. I believe Matt Norlander's reporting because he doesn't miss on stuff like this. And he put out that Kentucky's going to spend significantly more, maybe triple what everybody else is going to spend. And so if that's the case, well, guess what? They have a bigger pot to guarantee up front. That's been the big issue right now in high school basketball recruiting. None of these kids are committing because nobody can promise them, hey, this is how much we could actually pay you. It's, hey, we're at 15 to 20%. We have a cap of 2 to 3 million, maybe 4, and we don't know how we're going to spend it until we get to portal season. Well, if Kentucky has a cap of like 9 million because the school is giving them more of their rev share money, and I know I'm a little bit in the weeds, but I'm trying to explain why I think it's going to be Kentucky. Kentucky can offer them 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, whatever it takes to close the deal, and just say, yeah, and we'll still have money to put together a nice roster around you. So I'm a little bit in the weeds, but I think it's going to be Kentucky. I think the other thing to keep an eye on is commitment date. Again, this stuff is always subject to change. We are recording. It is exactly noon Eastern. It is exactly noon Eastern right now on Tuesday, October 7th. By the time you listen to this, there may be a commitment date set. There might be a commitment period. But I think sometime between this coming Friday to the following Monday, Tuesday, so October 13th, 14th, somewhere in there, I think he's going to commit. I think it's going to happen around his 18th birthday, which is this coming Sunday. And right now, I don't do crystal balls, and I've got burned before by saying this guy's leaning here, this guy's leaning there. But I got to tell you what I know right now, and I do feel like it's going to be Kentucky. All right, let's get to some interesting chats and comments from the comments section. Real quick, before we get to the Gators stuff, Matt, I want to Kentucky Outdoor Life is fired up today. Love this enthusiasm from Kentucky Outdoor Life. He says, we need a new football coach at Kentucky for our football team. Kentucky Outdoor Life, you do, brother. Probably spending a lot of time in the outdoors. You might have to move to the woods permanently if you have to watch this football team anymore. Listen, Kentucky is really bad. And I thought, I thought that it was interesting is that I think it was Justin Rowland put out a tweet that he said, like, it's not only that they're bad, there's no reason to think that when we talked about this, but there's no reason to think that there is going to be upward trajectory, right? Like there are teams that are not good right now. Auburn might not be good right now, might not be good this year, but you can sell. Hey, all of our best players are super young. It's going to get better. Florida, I think in theory, you could sell DJ Lagway another year. Now you kind of sold that this year, but you could still argue it. Whoever, Texas, you can sell an upward trajectory everywhere except for Kentucky. I don't think there's any and we talked about this too. Zero commitments from the state of Kentucky. I think 7 of the top 10 players in Kentucky are committed to Louisville. 0 players committed from Ohio. And so now you're going to have to go into the portal again, probably with less money, and try to piece together a roster. It's a total disaster. I'll stick with what I have said consistently about Mark Stoops. I don't think he's there next year. I think it's a negotiated buyout. We talked about it on Sunday's show a little bit. There was a report from Alan Cutler that said that basically last year they tried to, Mark Stoops wanted to negotiate his buyout then. The AD ignored the request. I don't know if I believe all of that, but I don't think he'll be back next year. By the way, I saw something from Luke. I don't know if Luke's still around, but earlier he said, this is really good. This is a little inside college basketball. This is a little inside college football. But he said even Matt Jones and KSR is turning on Stoops after having long given him the benefit of the doubt. Jones flat out said you cannot bring back Stoops short of a miracle or you lose the fan base. I had not seen that from Matt Jones, but I will say Matt Jones has been Stoops' number one supporter. You know, when things went sideways with John Calipari. By the way, I was texting a buddy. Do we all remember the basketball school controversy with John Calipari at Kentucky? That John Calipari basically was asking for funding, or, you know, he was referencing, hey, we need a new basketball facility. He said, yeah, you know, we're a basketball school. And then Mark Stoops got mad, and then the AD defended Mark Stoops. And it's like, feels like a lifetime ago. And yeah, John Calipari was 100% right. It was a basketball school. It is a basketball school. It always will be a basketball school. But what I'll say is Matt Jones has always been Mark Stoops' number one defender. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know I know that they had a good relationship for a long time. But when Matt Jones has turned on you, I think, let me even put it this way, and this is just speculation. I used to work for Matt. I haven't worked for Matt for years. I haven't talked to Matt for years. When Matt Jones turns on you, it's bad. But I think when Matt Jones turns on you, he also knows that the administration knows how bad it is. Just more proof that I think this is going to be something that ends quickly for Kentucky. The good news is, though, the basketball program is going to be very well funded going forward. This is funny, and this is good. And I need to take an L on this. B22 says, Torres, how do you feel about getting tricked on the fake crystal ball for Stokes? Okay, so little inside baseball. So we have all of our team accounts. Torres on Auburn, Torres on Kentucky, Torres on UConn. I do not run those accounts. Okay, we have interns that run all of them. First of all, I want to say this. I'm very proud of our internship program. It has led to several of our interns getting full-time jobs. The only one that I run is UConn. But what I will say is if I see something that is noteworthy, I post it on any of the pages, right? So Saturday morning, keep in mind, spoke on a panel Saturday till 5. Have a 4:30 a.m. wake-up call to go home. Sitting in an airport waiting for a 6:30 flight at about 5 a.m. Pacific time. I see a Tyran Stokes crystal ball. This was not on the intern. I saw it. I said, I'm just going to post this on the page. This is big. This is whatever. This is this. This is that. Posted up on the Torres on UK page. This was on Saturday. And oh my goodness, was I wrong? It wasn't on the intern. It was totally on me. And I had about 30,000 alerts when I landed of, yeah, that's not a real crystal ball, dude. Talk to your intern. Not on the intern. Mark, our intern, does a great job on that page. But what I will say, the crystal ball that came out on Monday that we just referenced, that is a real crystal ball because I quadruple checked it before posting it. So yes, I have to take the L on this one. I have to absolutely take the L. It was not on the intern. It was on Torres. B22, you caught Torres with the hand in the Tyran Stokes cookie jar. The fake crystal ball Torres. I'm just an old man on social media these days. Okay, listen, I don't know what's AI. I don't know what's real. I don't even know if I'm real at this point. Are you real, B22? I don't know. But yes, Torres got burned on the fake crystal ball. Really quickly, Matt, we'll get to the Florida stuff. I just want to see if there's anything else in a second here. Let's see here. Luke on the Matt Jones stuff, or on the basketball school stuff. Interesting. He says that comment, basketball school, was the turning point for Stoops. They haven't been the same since the 2021 season. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if saying, hey, we're a football school, but you did draw a line in the sand. And at the time, listen, it was easy to pile on Calipari. It had been a couple bad years. But I don't know. I think it's more that the sport changed. I think it's more that you went away from divisions. I think it's more that Vandy kind of figured out some things. You don't get Mississippi State every year. There's a lot of variables. One thing I want to defend Mark Stoops really quick, because I think there is this notion that they were only good because Florida stunk for a while, South Carolina stunk for a while, Vandy was terrible. I don't think that's true. I think we have to give Mark Stoops, the coaching staff, Vince Morrow, who's now at Louisville, like they had a lot. Like you go back to like that 20, I think, what was the Will Levis 10-win season, 2021? They had like 10, 12 NFL guys on that roster. Now, relative to Ohio State or Alabama, is 10, 12 guys over 3 years a lot? No, but it's a lot for Kentucky. And I don't have all the names in front of me, but I think that was the Wandale Robinson era. I think that was the Will Levis era, whatever. The point I'm trying to make is I will give Mark Stoops this, is I think there was this notion, and I think there's this revisionist history now that they were only good because South Carolina, Florida, Vanderbilt all stunk. You got to give him credit. I mean, basically, you go through, they beat everybody except for Georgia, and obviously some of the schools that were in the West, Alabama, LSU. But, you know, this was a team that consistently beat South Carolina, consistently beat Florida, you know, had its moments against other schools. But yeah, it feels like it has come full circle. Really quickly, let's see if there's anything else. Kentucky outdoors. Mark Stoops is a loser. Look at his record. I won't say that. Big Blue, this is good. Mark Stoops is not built for the NIL era. If things aren't the same as before, he would probably have another 10-win season. So I think this is fair. And I was thinking about this, actually. So I remember about 2 years ago, Mark Stoops had the famous pony up comments. Okay, for people who don't know what the pony up comments were, it was basically they lost to Georgia, they got embarrassed, it wasn't pretty, whatever. And I think it was one of the call-in shows, his fan base, one of the fans said, well, what do we do to get this fixed? And he says, you got to pony up. And ever since then, I've kind of been out on Stoops because Kentucky fans have ponied up time and time and time again. They ponied up to make him a $9 million a year coach. And it was funny because this is what I was thinking about. I remember at the time saying, you know, he makes $9 million. He could easily make $6 million. And I bet NIL would be better. And I had people killing me. Coaches can't pay for NIL. It's two separate things. And it's like, yeah, I understand. But I'm pretty sure there's a way that if you took significantly less money, more could go into NIL. I bring it up, and this is something that Mark Stoops should be asked and should be held accountable for. Look at college football this year. Some of the best teams have coaches that have publicly given back salary, which appears very obviously to have gone to NIL. Brent Venables gave back $1 million of his salary after last season. Brian Kelly gave back $1 million of his salary last year after a disappointing year. Mike Norvell, after a 2-10 year, gave back his salary. So it can be done, and that would help NIL. But I do think, to a broader point, I don't even think it's about NIL at this point. I just think the high school recruiting has now fallen off. The development has now fallen off. And I think when you don't have the high school infrastructure in place and you're Kentucky and you got to go in the portal and get like 8, 10, 12 new starters every offseason, it's just not going to work. You're not going to get the guys that you need to compete. So I think part of it is NIL, but now it's starting to impact the high school recruiting. It is bad, bad, bad news. Man, I didn't think talking Tyran Stokes would get the football fan base this fired up. All right. Okay, I think we're done on Stoops. You know what? We'll save the Florida comments for another time. There was a Florida fan, earlier in the show, if you missed it, we talked James Franklin, the schools that could conceivably make sense if he were to decide to leave. Not get fired. He's not getting fired. But basically, Florida is a school that probably is still going to open. And I think I kind of mentioned, is that a school that would be interested in James Franklin? One of their fans said, hell no, and gave a couple names that he liked. We'll save that one for another time. I think we're going to have plenty of time to talk James Franklin. I think we're going to have plenty of time to talk Florida if they make a coaching change, which, again, I still think they're going to. They're 8. By the way, I had this last random thought. We did Arch Manning on Sunday show, and somebody was like, how do you know that? Are you sure Arch Manning stinks, or is Florida just a good team? And I think the quote that the guy gave, there's a difference between a losing team and a bad team. The insinuation is that maybe Florida isn't bad. They just lost some tough games. I'm like, bro, they lost as a 17-point home favorite to South Florida. They had 141 yards of total offense against Miami. And then, oh, by the way, they're a 7.5-point underdog at Texas A&M. Point I'm trying to make, I don't think that Florida figured out some magic elixir that, there's no magic carpet ride for Billy Napier to a 9-3 season and 8 straight wins to end the regular season. I don't see it. And I think we're going to have plenty of time to talk about the Florida coaching search. All right, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, first of all, we appreciate everybody tuning in here on a Tuesday morning. I know a lot of you are at work, in the car. I'm always curious, by the way, I don't know if everyone's watching at their desk at work. I'm always fascinated by just, where people watch at this hour, how you're consuming the show. But however you're consuming it, we do appreciate your support. If you are not subscribed to the show, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify on podcast, YouTube. We have closed on 62,000 subscribers. I think we can get to 70 by the start of college basketball season. Can't do it without your support. Let's get us to 70. Tell a friend, tag a friend. Nobody talks college sports like us. Thank you to our partners, SeatGeek. SeatGeek.com. Use promo code Torres. That gets you $20 off your first purchase. By the way, Cauley Puffs gets you 15% off all of your purchases. And thank you again to Circa Sportsbook, Circa Casino, Mint, Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. That is where their new sportsbook is open. Time to go. Appreciate your support. We will be back probably Thursday morning, maybe Wednesday. Maybe something crazy happens Wednesday. Maybe Tyran Stokes commits and we talk about that. Otherwise, we'll be back Thursday morning, and we very much do appreciate your support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick. You F-head unblock me, bro. Paul says, great show, great knowledge. We appreciate you. And we are going to get out of here. Oh, by the way, this is good. The Arkansas search, kind of quiet on the Arkansas search. Phil says, is the wolf in the hen house an accurate description of Bobby P at Arkansas? Oh, the wolf is in the hen house. He's trying to get that job. It's just a question of whether he's going to do enough. We will preview Tennessee, Arkansas on Thursday's show, as well as monster SEC slate. Bama, Missouri, Auburn, Georgia, A&M, Florida. What a slate. Oregon, Indiana. We're going to come back. We'll preview that slate on Thursday, and who knows what's going to happen between now and then. Tuesday afternoon.